I want to welcome you guys to our Friday night Bible study. You guys know how we do it. We are dealing with a very important topic tonight. There will be an outline that you can find on the GBC website. And I want to kind of let you know up front, we're going to be in class for a couple of hours tonight. So I'm hoping that you are rested and you are well prepared for having your mind challenged and having your understanding illuminated, if you will. We're going to be dealing with three areas of our study. Today, in a few minutes, I'm going to be dealing with an introduction to understanding why different political ideologies are good or bad and how to recognize the process of political influence and persuasion works in the life of people wittingly or unwittingly. That's going to take about a half an hour for us to do. And then I'm going to actually be reading through the Communist Manifesto and actually talking about it as I read. That will take about an hour. So it's 6:35. Our introduction will be about 25 minutes as I lay a foundation for what we call the Hegelian dialectic, this dialectical process that basically is viewed as a phenomena for progress in history, but it has been employed in several different ways. I want to talk about that, particularly in the context of politics. I've done this years back. I talk about the dialectic a lot, and I want to demonstrate that both biblically and visually here in a moment. I hope you are able to keep up with us, because this will be important in terms of your ability to discern what's going on in our world and how to properly interpret what you see, quite frankly. I want to do this up front as well. I want to actually call your attention to two websites that I think are going to be helpful for you if you will write these down. The first website, it's not website, it's actually a YouTube program. The first one is called Revolt, like revolting Summit, Revolt Summit 2019, Revolt Summit. And before Revolt Summit, here's what I want you to write. This may not make sense, but write down TI dash Killer Mike dash Candace Owens dash and more talk. You can also write Black Agenda, and then you can write voting and Donald Trump. Revolt 2019 will probably get you there, but with those other characteristics, it will get you to where you want to go. And you want to watch that YouTube event. You want to watch it carefully. It's going to do something for us in terms of our dialogue about how people understand things differently and how they come to the table to talk about it. That's the first one. It's called Revolt Summit 19. T.I. Killer Mike, Candace Owens, and more talk. Black Agenda, voting, and Donald Trump. Here's another one that I want you to look at between now and next week as well. It's called The Most Important Conversation of 2020. The most important conversation of 2020. The most important conversation of 2020, Black history, and then write full version. Full version. This is about an hour and 20 minutes long. So the two YouTube events that I want you to watch are Revolt Summit 2019. And some of the names that will take you right there are T.I., Killer Mike, Candace Owens, Black Agenda, voting, and Donald Trump. It is a forum with an eclectic of a group of African Americans who come from very different schools of thought, but are prominent in our world. And as such, that particular event does a great job of showing what is necessary for us to understand why people enter into conflict, why people enter into vigorous, hostile debate. But that particular event had a kind of turn of events in it and a change that I thought was remarkably surprising. And I really do want you to watch it because I want to talk about it next Friday. This eclectic group of people are young people up to about my age, and so they actually reflect the present generation of African Americans with the different views, with the plethora of views that our society holds. And they do a great job of fielding political issues, social issues, economic issues, what have you. If I needed a panel of African Americans that I thought were able to talk and speak into political, social issues, that panel I would use. The second group that I said is the most important conversation of 2020 is also a group of African Americans of all ages, young to old, baby boomers up to Gen Zers and Gen Ys, whatever the terms are used. And they are also very articulate, very clear-headed, very thoughtful. I do want to bring a caveat in these two before we get started. The Revolt Summit 2019, which I really want you to see, is done by Puff Daddy, P. Diddy Combs, okay? He is talking to powerful African American people who he feels that can make an impact in the culture in a dialogue format and addressing the agendas and needs of the African American community. He did that, and I say that to say this. When you watch that one, which for me is going to be one of the most important ones for you to watch for our dialogue about the sociological differences that people have, express rather, around political views. That one's going to work. You're going to have to wear your hazmat suit because in that particular one, Summit, Revolt Summit 2019, they are not Christian. And these are a bunch of African Americans, young people and old people, and some of them use bad language. You're going to have to be able to work your way around that and listen very carefully to what they talk about. That's just one of the problems, I believe, that does occur in the African American community, where there's a breakdown between African Americans and their dialogue with non-African Americans, where African Americans will use language that's much more inflammatory and more broadly offensive, which is acceptable in their own community. But if they want to get across to someone that is non-black, they really do need to know how to come into the middle of what we call conventional terminology and expressions of language that's non-offensive if they want to. But I need you, because of the content, to watch it. Now, when you watch the second one will be the most important conversation of 2020. Black history, all of them are intelligent. All of them speak with a great deal of basic dignified language. None of them express any kind of overtly shameful, perverse speech. And several of them are professing Christians. So with that one, you get a pleasant, eclectic of worldviews, as well as a Christian sort of framework of conclusion. It will be edifying for you. For those of you that are watching, I want my non-black brothers and sisters to watch these summits too. The reason why I want my Caucasian brothers and my Latino brothers and my Asian brothers to watch this is because I need you to have a kind of tertiary position by which you can watch African Americans deal with these topics from an African American comfort zone level and see how they interact. If you remain objective, you'll be able to benefit from their content in a way that when we discuss it next week, you'll be able to resonate with why I draw some of the insights that I do from that particular topic. The reason why I'm calling your attention, saints, to those two YouTube events is because I know that within the things that we're going to be talking about tonight, there is a great disparity of perspective that often causes people not to be able to see reality in terms of the broad diversity of identity groups. The failure with our present propaganda mode of conversation is that it operates out of a radical dialectic that creates hostilities between groups. And when you create hostility between groups, you create a set of assumptions that really become stereotypical. Like our Caucasian brothers, if they do not have exposure to the broad eclectic, what we would call community of African Americans who are intelligent, who are bright, who are reasonable, who are rational, who are sound, you may not even think they exist based upon what you watch in the media. And I want you to know they do. And it would be the same way for both of those clips if you watch them. It's very important that you do that, because I want you to, once you watch those clips, you will know in part where I stand. If you don't know already where I stand, you will know. And a lot of people don't know where I stand, saints. And it's because within the framework of the hostility that occurs in the set of assumptions that is produced between hostile groups, very seldom, you're going to see this in the P. Diddy's Revolt Summit, that they're going to really rise to a level of real contention. Because it's going to be assumed by the audience that the people on this side are people on the right, and people on this side are people on the left, and they automatically do the dialectical thing of fighting against each other. And the audience is largely African American, and they're coming from a certain set of assumptions too. So it gets ugly initially, but then it settles down, and there is a great deal of productive dialogue that comes out of it. If you can handle this, I'm talking about website or YouTubes that I need you guys to watch for next Friday, because it's going to come back up. So you coming in late, you need to get that from somebody, because next Friday I want to talk about. I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to work through the dynamics of how it will offend you and how it will challenge your assumptions. And then how it concludes in a way that you go, oh, that wasn't that bad. We have more in common than we do apart, but it doesn't look like it in the process of dialoguing. Does that make some sense? That's what I want from the people at Grace. I want the people at Grace to be able to be quick to hear and slow to speak, so that we are not given to wrath, because that's where the mistake is made. I want the people of Grace to be able to understand the privilege of operating from a proper identity mode and operating from a position of perspective that God grants you, that allows you not to collapse into arguments before you really understand them. So having said that, I'm already kind of pressing in further into our conversation, but I'm hoping that the saints that are following, we're going to have a good class tonight. We're going to have a lot of people online watching, because that's just where we are right now, and I'm glad you are. For the next half an hour, I'm going to do a preliminary in preparing you to understand why, when we talk about a dialectical process playing a role in manipulating you down a path or a course and you not knowing it, it is critically important for you to be able to pick up on that. That's going to take about 20 minutes. And then once we get into the manifesto, the Communist Manifesto of Marx and Engels, that is going to take a full 1 hour. We may be done about 8:15 with those two sides of it. Then I want to open the phones and open the mics for Q&A. That means I want you to be expository listeners, and I want you to be able to write down questions. And we really do need you to participate in the Zoom. We haven't pressed that. I want to press that home, because we need to know how the Zoom works in this format. I need to hear what it sounds like for Zoom people to bring up questions. We need to hear it in-house, and you also need to hear it online, because we want to set up that forum where you can participate in-house in the Q&A with us. So please make sure you call at the time that we open up for Q&A, so that you can participate with us, because going forward, that will be an important component in our studies. The other thing I want to say before I get started is that for some of you, this is going to be an epiphany. You're going to actually see things in ways you have never saw them before. Your eyes are going to be opened up to dimensions of underlying ideologies that you haven't before, and you're going to be thankful for it. You're going to be glad that you set aside this time. And I'm sure of that because that's how God works. There are going to be some of you that are going to be offended by what I say. And I'm sorry already up front for that, because it's just the nature of the beast when you're setting forth certain truths and certain facts that people get offended. I'm already praying that the offense doesn't result in blindness. Okay, so here's how it's going to start. I'm going to open in prayer. Father, thank you for your mercy and your goodness. And I'm glad for those who have chosen to come out. You graced them to do it. May we all understand the extreme importance of this event, and that the truth that may come out of it would be to our growing allegiance to who you are and how you have revealed yourself to us. And may it root in us a kind of confidence in you outside of ourselves that produces boldness to tell the truth with joy to those who are trapped and who are not aware that the real solution is in Jesus Christ. And may our churches who are part of this, and families and brothers and sisters at home, wherever they are, may they have aha moments all the way throughout this process so that they can be more fully equipped to do exactly what you have called them to do. We are asking for the forgiveness of sins. We are asking for cleansing by your Spirit, purging us by your blood, but certainly strengthening us with all might in the inner man, that we might be able to engage this present revolution in a way that might honor you and draw your people to you so that we can be productive for the cause of Christ. For all that are watching, for all that are coming, Spirit of God, do what only you can do. Open our eyes that we may behold wonderful things out of your law. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. The first thing I want to call your attention to would be a PowerPoint. And the title of that PowerPoint is called The Pump Cart Paradigm. Leave that right there. You probably won't be able to get that online, but if you can see it, you have a pump cart there. These pump carts were used when the railroad systems were built from the East Coast to the West Coast and across and abroad. And a pump cart machine is a metaphor of the dialectical process that works in our world, where two people are operating on opposite sides of the rails. One person is pumping down while the other person is pumping up. And these opposing energies, kinetic energies, create a movement. These opposing energies create a movement. Now, while these parties are exercising a dialectic of theses and antithesis, they are nevertheless going in the same direction. That is the pump cart paradigm that I want to lay out before you, which people don't understand when they don't understand the danger of a dialectical scheme. There are three realities taking place. One reality is that the people on the pump cart are at odds. But while they are at odds, they are serving the same purpose. They're all going in the same direction. And this is the danger of diabolical politics when you don't understand what its goals are. Hegel taught Marx and Engels the dialectical process, and they learned how to use it in order to manipulate political agendas. Now, if you have an outline in front of you, I'm going to actually use this to teach something about it that I think is critically important. This is a key to understanding. So I call it the pop cart paradigm, and under it I talk about what is called the dialectical process of blank politics. Do you guys have that in your outline? Yes. The dialectical process of blank politics. If you have a pen, and please have one, we have them in the back. For those of you who are watching, just listen, and if you can, write this down, it's important. This pop cart mechanism, this pop cart paradigm actually is a paradigm of government. It's the ability to govern people even though they are operating in opposing positions. What I have under the first line is going to be surprising, but when you watch the two videos that I am recommending, and we come back next week and talk about it, you will have had a visual, expressed demonstration of what I'm talking about right now. So under the dialectical process of P politics, what do you think the P is that I'm talking about here? The P is plantation. The P is plantation. It's the dialectic process of plantation politics. That will evoke in all of us certain notions, certain ideas, certain assumptions, certain experiences. I told you, you might very well be offended, but if you watch the two videos, you will see what I am saying. There is a dialectic of what is called plantation politics that if you don't recognize it, you're playing a part in it as well. Second level, we have what I call the left-right conflict narrative. And we've been talking about it for a long time, forever. You got your red states and your what? Blue states. Y'all awake with me? Red states, blue states. And they are viscerally hostile to each other. And they must be because they are committed team members on each side. And if ever the red should become blue or bleed over into blue, it ceases to be red and it becomes purple. And if the blue should ever leak over into the red, it ceases to be blue. It also becomes what? Purple. Purple becomes the outcome of the conflict, which is a whole new class, which is what Marx teaches. It's called progression. And this is what I want you to understand. The left-right conflict narrative, however, without control of your what? Destiny. This is the diabolical nature of politics. When it has worked you within the framework of the left-right objective, you look up and both of y'all are complaining about things not working out the way you want them to. And that is the history of America up to this day. So when we talk about the dialectical process of plantation politics, we're talking about folks historically being either conservative or liberal, being either Republican or Democrat, as if there is no other option. And I want to make sure you understand that from a Christian standpoint, there has to be another option. And I want to challenge you in a moment about that here in a second. When I say the left-right conflict narrative without control of your destiny, it leaves you on a path where we continue to go away as a culture and as a world. Watch this, as a culture and as a world, we're going away from God. I think we can all agree with that, right? As a culture and as a world, we're going away from God. Well, how are we going away from God when every 8 years the red wins and then every 8 years the blue wins? How do we go away from God? Well, we go away from God because, quite frankly, we have not left the plantation. And the plantation here is the system. The plantation is the system. Here's the next line I want you to read. My M is better than your M. My M is better than your M. Now that I've given you the kind of motif or analogy of a plantation, and I've shown you the pump car, pull that back up, of two people on either side. I did have another one where there were multiple people. I have another image where they're wider, where you can have 3 or 4 or 5 people on one side and 3 or 4 or 5 people on the other side, and they're both pumping, right, in kinetically opposing ways. That analogy represents group identity. One group on one side, the other group on the other side, they're arguing. At one time, one group is up. And while they're up, the other group is what? And at the other time, they're up. And while they're up, the other group is what? But they're all going in the same direction. And whenever one wins and the other one loses, whoever wins gets to say, my M is better than your M. What is the M that I'm talking about? Master. And that's all politics is. Choosing masters every 8 years. And when we win, we get to gloat because we have vigorously sacrificed, labored, preached, did missionary work, everything you should do for the gospel. That's what people do in order to exalt their master. And in the context of American politics, it's the president. Do you see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? Let me go on to continue talking this through. Under point number one is up for a while. Who are those? The Republicans. That's what the R is for. Then the other one is up for a while. Who is that? The Democrats. Thirdly, both are headed in the same what? That's called socialism. Please mark that. Socialism. It's the dirty word that you often hear from the right, and it's the darling word that you often hear from the left. But socialism is really the system of Marxist Engels' philosophy, if you are tracking with me. And both the Republicans and the Democrats produce social outcomes. Fourthly, the result actually is greater government, more taxes, and less freedom. That's the history of America. Greater government, more taxes, and less freedoms. And that equals socialism. That equals bondage. That equals the stage of what you and I are about to deal with when Marx uses the language that he does and Engels uses the language that he's about to use as well. And I'm sharing this with you to show you how dangerously close we are to the prophetic outcome of Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto. We go on. Point number 5. What is the solution to this dialectical process of being up as a Republican one election and down as a Republican in the next election, up as a Democrat, down as a Democrat, a Republican, and we're still all going in the same direction, which is not a good direction because here we are almost at another revolution. What's the solution? Is it the changing of presidents? How about the solution is that we get off the plantation? But now if you get off the plantation, you're going to have some real challenges. Can I talk about that for a moment? If a man or a woman is bold enough to get off the plantation, then they have been rewarded with the F word. Do you know what the F word is? Freedom. Freedom. But if you're rewarded with the F word, you're going to have qualities and attributes that allows you to demonstrate that you can handle freedom. Because if you can't handle freedom, you're going to do what many of our forefathers did when the Civil War was over and the Proclamation of Emancipation was set forth, and they were able to walk off the plantations. Do you know 3 things occurred? One is some people did not leave the plantation. They stayed. You can work through all of the variables and all of the reasons and implications. I totally get it. I totally get it. They had no desire to go into the unknown world of, Star Trek. Braving new worlds. Got it. It's called being conditioned by a normalcy pattern that says, I do not want to have to deal with unknown factors. Many, many millions left. And they stayed gone. And if you were to deal with what went down, you would recognize that many of them suffered. Many of our African American, our former slave parents and grandparents and great grandparents, when they left the plantation, they suffered horribly under a lack of resources, a lack of direction, a lack of wisdom, a lack of clarity, a lack of divine covering, because many of them got sick and died from all kinds of diseases. And the impact for many years was horrible. So you have some who stayed on because they just couldn't handle freedom. You had others who left because they were part of the confidence of the larger group, even though they experienced many demising type of experiences. Ultimately, they succeeded. Wish I had time. 7 years after the proclamation of emancipation, African Americans were able to actually settle down and begin to prosper in ways that were magnificent, that I wish I had time to talk about why it's important for us to be talking about that era instead of the Jim Crow era. But I'll talk about that in a moment. I'll talk about it by way of implication. Do you know, however, some people left the plantation, and when they saw all of the harrowing troubles that were out there, they came back. Right. And I'm actually speaking in metaphors, and I'm speaking symbolically about how hard it is for people to be able to walk as free people, psychologically, spiritually, socially, and in many ways. It is not new with me, novel with me. It has been said for decades and decades, all the way back to the time when my father was wrapped up in the Black Panthers, all the way back to Malcolm X, all the way back to many of the 60s revolutionary fighters that we were still on the plantation. You guys know that. The question we would have to ask in the 21st century is there still a kind of plantation upon which we are on? And you can work that out yourself. I don't particularly care. What I'm doing now is kind of provoking a vision, a clarity of factors that play into why groups don't see things the same way across the spectrum. Because some don't leave the plantation. They're completely trapped by politics. Some do leave the plantation, and because they're out there, they don't really have a third rail or a legitimate option to the plantation, and they either, fall away into irrelevance and suffer demise, but then others come back to the plantation. In our context, the metaphor is that the plantation is what, ladies and gentlemen? Politics. Okay? It's politics. It's politics. What is the solution? Get off the plantation. What is the solution? Be very clear on how you participate in the dialectical process. So let me give you a Bible verse to show you what I'm talking about. I'm in Joshua chapter 6, and I'm going to be reading verses 13 through 15 of Joshua 6. And I want to show you how when a believer fails to keep his priorities straight, that he can collapse into a dialectic too and miss what God is doing. Now, right now I'm teaching us in the book of Daniel on what? Vision. I'm talking about how to see the world the way that God sees it, and how to see the world in a way in which if you see it the way God sees it, God will bless you, God will equip you, God will gift you so that you can be guided and that you can have insight to be able to negotiate the dialectical process without collapsing up under some of the things we have already said will occur when you don't know what you're doing or you haven't been guided. Joshua was God's servant to bring Israel into the promised land. Joshua leads the children of Israel into the promised land after Moses brought them out of Egyptian bondage. The account before us is apropos in that the children of Israel were for 430 years slaves. And when God liberated them through Moses, they went into the wilderness in order to learn how to be free men and women. And in order to learn how to represent God in a world that was hostile to him. That parallels us. Joshua is making his way through the land, carving out battles and engaging in campaigns to establish the inheritance of the people of God. And he runs across a phenomena that he cannot handle. And here's what it says in verse 13. It says, Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. Don't want to deal with that. In Joshua chapter 5, verse 13, it says, and it came to pass that when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and he looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, watch this, saints. Are you for us, or are you for them? Now, what had Joshua fallen into? A dialectic. He was immediately challenging this guy whom he did not know on a set of assumptions for which he had no other categories but an us or them dialectical argument. Do you guys understand what I just stated? Are you for us? Or are you for them? Are you on our side? Or are you on their side? He collapsed into an absolute failure of several things, of who he was in God and who God was in this plan. Are you guys following what I'm saying? Now, the angel helped him because the angel said, no. You know what the angel said to Joshua? Get off the plantation. Because there's a whole nother category of vision and thought that you have to understand if you're going to actually operate in your identity and calling. If you don't, you're going to fail to accomplish your mission. The third category, if you guys don't already have it, is God's purpose, God's plan, God's goal, God's agenda. The person that was before Joshua was the Lord Jesus as the captain of the Lord's army with his sword drawn in order for Joshua to continue advancing in the purpose of God. But Joshua didn't know that until the revelation came. And the revelation comes to him now. Stay on point, Joshua. This is not about an us versus them. That's politics. Do you guys see the parallel? Do you understand what I'm getting at here? How important it is to recognize that leadership can operate out of what I call the dilemma of horizontal viewing. Joshua forgot that this was a heavenly battle. Joshua forgot that the heavens do rule in the kingdoms of men. Joshua didn't even ask him, are you for the Lord or for our enemies? And the issue is going to be, as we work through this, is your priority horizontal, dialectical, the either or dichotomy of left and right, or is your priority Jehovah God, the Lord Jesus Christ, as the captain of our salvation? So here's the questions that I'm going to ask as we prepare to get into our Hegelian dialectic, because it's just so absolutely crucial that they answer them, that I asked them. Verse number 6 in your outline, it says, if we get off of the plantation, Joshua 6:13 and 15, then watch this. This is going to kind of flip back to where we are in our present situation, but it's important. If you know how to get off the plantation, you can actually be involved in politics. But what are you doing? You are participating free of identity politics. You are participating free of identity politics. Raise your hand if you understand what I mean by what I just said. If you don't, I'll help you. Identity politics is perceiving that you have to be either blue or red, that you have to either be left or right. But if you are blue or red, you must logically conclude that you are back on the what? Pump cart. Plantation. And there are a lot of people who are listening right now because the only kind of paradigm or model they operate out of is the pump cart paradigm. They make the false assumption that I'm on one or the other side. They did the same thing Joshua did. They drew a conclusion because they had no third category. They had no other reference point. If they knew this third category that I'm talking about and don't operate with that reference point as a high plausibility that whoever is saying you can actually accomplish God's will in your life without having to be on the plantation of the pump cart, and fail to bring that into the consideration for someone like me who is not talking in terms of the dialectic, then you are willingly being ignorant of that third option of which I promote all the time. And here's the option that I promote all the time. That a Christian must be a Christian before he is anything else, or else he cannot be a successful Christian for God. Here's the next thing I want to say to help you, because we're getting ready to go deeper. What are you? Are you a victim or a victor? Don't answer. Are you a victim or a victor? Now, the only way you can actually answer that with integrity is if you actually know your identity. Your identity, in the context of the 21st century and the stuff that we're dealing with, the narratives and the conflicts and the dialogues, your identity will tell whether or not you're a victim or a victor. And your identity is always shaped by a narrative. There is some meta-narrative that impacts your identity, for which once your identity is impacted, out of the abundance of the heart doth the mouth speak. All identities are impacted by narratives and meta-narratives. I hope you are a Bible-thinking Christian enough to know that God gave us that in the beginning of the Genesis account. The challenge of meta-narrative influences upon our identity. Now, the serpent was the most subtle creature on the earth that the Lord God had made. And he spoke to the woman and said, now we enter into a meta-narrative dialectic. And that's where the human race now gets caught up in the struggle. Had Eve been clear on her identity, she would not have collapsed into the left-right argument that trapped her and drove her off the paradisial land of God. But once we got driven out of paradise, we were stuck in the dialectic up to this day. I'm praying that God will open your eyes to that reality, because God has let us know the reason why we are in the dialectic is because of sin. Sin in general has brought us to this place. So I say this, you're going to be a victim or a victor based upon your identity, which is influenced and shaped by meta-narratives. For the believer, the meta-narrative is redemption in Jesus Christ, salvation through Jesus Christ becoming our identity, Christ becoming our substitute and surety, Christ becoming the essence of who we are in him, Christ being our captain, Christ being our victor, Christ being our salvation, Christ being our triumph. If that is the case, if your identity is actually rooted in Jesus Christ, the words that come out of your mouth must not be victim, but victor. Thanks be to God, who causes us to always triumph in Christ. We are more than conquerors through him that loved us. But if that resource of meta-narrative dialogue is not constantly shaping my identity, if the meta-narrative, the narrative of theology, the narrative of biblical truth, the narrative of a biblical worldview is not affirming my identity can be now shaped and formed by another meta-narrative, and it will be evident by how I think and by how I talk and by how I act and by what I say. Does that make sense? That's the real battle here. That's the real battle here. So you hear the victim mentality as a major part of the narrative, don't you? You hear it. You hear it, and people are collapsing into it every day. And I get that, because if the meta-narrative that is shaping their identity basically says that I'm a victim, that I'm a slave, that I'm trapped, that I have no power, that I have no volition, that I have no hope, no optimism, then I get it. But that really should never be the testimony of a believer in Christ. But it's time for us to begin to work through the Communist Manifesto, because I want you to be able to hear it. I want our hundreds of listeners and observers to be able to hear it. If you have questions about what I just shared with you in terms of the dialectical process and in terms of the issue of identity, in terms of the concept of victim and victor, please understand that what I'm talking about right now is what Marx and Engels understood was necessary for them to have to navigate in order to bring major masses of people under the influence of socialism. They had to make sure that you understood and bought into a meta narrative of slavery. We're about to deal with it right now. Like I said, some of you will have a revelation, an epiphany, and you will have clarity. Others of you are already offended. I'm sorry. But if you can follow this through, at least you will understand that we are coming from a biblical premise as we deal with rejecting the present secular political narrative of this world. Now, why am I dealing with the Communist Manifesto today? Because we are having made this observation for years now, we are dealing with a neo-Marxist, watch this, a neo-Marxist cultural revolution. And you can't miss that unless you are not informed. So let's see as we walk through this for about an hour. It's going to go on till about, because I'm looking at the clock, it's going to go on till about 8:15, and then I'm going to open the phone lines and mics for conversation. So, the Communist Manifesto is a declaration by a group of people who survived the French Revolution and struggled with its outcome, and being discontented with the world, thought it best that they draw up another kind of constitutional agenda, worldview, and program by which they could bring about a solution to what they were recognizing were continual crises in the world. Marx and Engels, that is Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, were students of Friedrich Hegel. Friedrich Hegel is what I've been teaching you guys for years, one of the Enlightenment philosophers. He was an atheist. He was an individual that had thrown off God. He was from Germany, just like Karl Marx and just like Engels. They all are from Germany. The German philosophers of the Enlightenment period were very powerful thinkers, but they were consistently atheistic or agnostic in their presupposition and framework. That's why you will never see God as a prominent part of the narrative of Marx or Engels. He is not in this discourse. He is not believed to be in existence, and therefore for Engels and Marx, will you hear me? For them, the way the world is saved is by a political process that has as its ultimate outcome communism. From a biblical worldview, we call that humanism. And then when we deal with it eschatologically, we call it the Antichrist system. Just letting you know now. This is really interesting because the Communist Manifesto was written in 1848, and it was written some 60 years after the French Revolution, but it was written also some 70 years after the American Revolution. So America had just settled itself after its revolution, France after its revolution, and Marx and Engels are young men who are completely beside themselves about things not going their way. And so they get caught up in groups, nefarious groups, like you got all kind of groups in the world that feel like if they can come together and put their brains together and work on new ideas and new ways of living, that they can draw people to themselves and then move the world in a different direction. Well, they were very successful in a lot of ways because the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and then ultimately the Bolshevik Revolution, some of you guys may know that, Russian Revolution, which would have come down the line in terms of Hegel and Marx. This would have been in the time of Stalin and Lenin, and then Mao, China. That was an era where revolution became so bloody, hundreds of millions of people died. Marx will show you the implications of that here. What I want to do now is share with you how they thought, because I want you to be able to identify as we work our way through it, where we are in their projection. I'm going to show you their errors too, because I just want you to know how to think right about how to deconstruct Marx. Because if you deconstruct Marx right, you can show people who are what I consider deceived by it, where they're making their mistake. Also, if you deconstruct Marx right, you can see where you are on the spectrum of socialism as he depicts it. Again, this is going to be a little challenging as I go through it because I'm going to be asking you guys some questions that's going to put you on the spot, but necessarily so, because I want your eyes to be opened so that you do not practice the hypocrite. Because we can be a hypocrite when we espouse a position for which we actually are not actually practicing. And it's only because we get trapped by identity politics. So here it is. And I'm looking for the conversation. Write down your questions because I'm looking for the conversation. You guys be ready to join us in Zoom in an hour because I'm looking forward to the conversation. One of the things that bothers me is I remember years ago, not only this concerning the Black Panthers, I would say this. If you were back in the 60s and you were very conscious of the movement of the Black Panthers, when they were very much upset with the way conditions were among African Americans, guess what they never taught? They never taught that we were victims. They never taught that. They understood that kind of language and that kind of dialogue traps you. But see what I have been, that's why I'm warning today that what's going on today doesn't even remotely reflect what happened in the days of Martin Luther King. It's something wholly different today. Wholly different. And people don't see it because the language is used. A specter is haunting Europe. I'm working through the manifesto. Pull it up so people can see it, please. A specter is haunting Europe. Now, this is where Marx and a bunch of other guys are writing. And this is narrative form, so I'm going to be a little bit dramatic because it's narrative form, and I want you to feel it. Is that okay? Otherwise, you're not going to be able to endure this hour. A specter is haunting Europe. And please, again, forgive me for having to explain terms, but I do understand that in my community, we are not as literate as we ought to be, and as a consequence, we have to explain things. What do you mean, Marx, when you say a specter? You mean a haunting, very ominous vision of something that has very high potential negative consequences if it could come to pass. The term was used on a more practical level at that time, more analogous level of seeing a ghost. The idea of a specter is something that's looming, that's about to rise up and take over, and you really don't want that to happen in your own mind. That's the way he's doing it. And what's very fascinating about the way that they crafted this is that they wanted to intimidate with a level of fear those who didn't understand the Communist Manifesto. A specter is haunting Europe. A specter of communism. He's playing with it. All the power of the old Europe has entered into a holy alliance to exercise this specter. Exorcise, not exercise, exorcise, cast out like a devil. All of the alliances, religion and politics and business is coming together to try to stop communism. There's a kind of gloating going on here, because they're sold out on the dialectical process that they think necessarily must lead to communism as a solution to our world problems. Y'all following me? Let me keep going. So he calls on the Pope, the Tsars, the Metterniches, the Gistands, the French, the radicals, Germans, policy spies. These are all different categories and classes that were in Europe at that time that came together concerned about this thing called communism. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power? Where is the opposition that has not hurled back the branding reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties as well as against its reactionary adversaries? Two things result from this fact. And this is where he is saying everywhere you go, you find people who don't like the fact that we are calling for change, that we are some kind of evil communism. That's all he's saying. And he goes on to say, communism is already not acknowledged by all European powers to be itself power. Communism is already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power. Can I say something about that? What he is doing is he's boasting in a victory before he's fought a war. I just want you to see that, okay? He so believes in his ideal because he's a disciple of Hegel, and he understands the dialectical process. And right now, he has seen the third stages of feudalism overcoming the conflict between the proletariats and the bourgeoisie in France, and it has settled into a socialism. And he's explained that socialism is a halfway home system to communism. He says, but I'm sure that socialism will not work, and we're going to learn why he says that. And it's going to come home to you and I in a moment here very quickly. Under number 2, it is high time that communists should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet this nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifest of the party itself. What is he saying? Come out. Like all of the different categories are coming out today. He says, come out. Let people see you. And here's what else he says, of which he was horribly wrong. He says, let them see communism flourish and produce a witness that would defy their assumptions that communism is bad. What he's saying in essence here is, if we allow communism to do what it wants to do, all of you who feared it will recognize you were wrong in your fears. Problem is, just a couple decades later, blood was shed everywhere under the name of communism that destroyed the world in China, that destroyed the world in Italy, that destroyed the world in Germany. It was horrible. See, Marx was really a false prophet. Let me keep going. And see, you would know that if you really knew history. To this end, communists various nationalities have assembled in London, sketched the following manifesto to be published in English, French, German, Italian, Flemish, and Danish languages. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of what? Class struggle. That should be a mark that you would want to grasp, because class struggle is the way that you reduce everything to what we call identity politics. Class struggle. Class struggle. And you're going to see that as we work our way through. Both class and struggle are what would be called communistic terms. Struggle is always the term that's used to define our present situation. Class is always the term that's used to categorize the dichotomy or what we call the dialectic, the tension between the classes. That's the way that he puts it. Class struggle. You're going to find that a lot of what Marx says will ring true until certain tendencies continue to pop up. So watch how this works. He says freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian. Patrician meaning patriots, plebeian meaning people that work the fields. Because largely what was going on in Marx's day was agricultural labor, okay? The Industrial Revolution had set in already, but we are not dealing with a kind of technological advancement that you and I are dealing with. Largely, we're dealing with agricultural labor. By the way, Marx is very much aware of the enterprise of slavery, because he's watching it as it happens. But the issue of slaves is not on his radar as a point of concern, i.e., he couldn't give a damn about slaves. Let me keep going because I want you to get this. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, common person. When I write in the blue, that's what I mean. I'm the one interpreting that with the colors. Common person, lord and serf. What is a serf? He's an agricultural field person. A guild master is the person that's down at the docks where people are working as what do we call them? Longshoremen. And you got to be on the guild. You got to be on the books. And this has always been the case when the Industrial Revolution got large enough. You had to be on Guild A, Guild B, Guild C, the Book D, Book E. They just logged you in. There are all kind of dynamics in that, but just follow that. Good. This is actually larger than my print. Let me use this. And journeyman. In a word, oppressor and oppressed. Do you see what he just did with these classes? He wrapped them up under two categories. What? Oppressor and oppressed. Now, I just want you to mark that, because what's happening here, and I talk about this when I'm teaching my ladies on how to communicate, how to identify the tone of your narrative. You guys remember that? I said, whenever you're going to teach a text, identify the tone of the text, because if you don't identify the tone of the text, you can read a different tone into that text and betray the implications of that text because you fail to recognize the tone. Like when the scriptures, when Jesus said in John 7:37, he said, let me see here, in John 7:37, he says, whosoever thirsts, let him come to me. Out of their bellies shall flow rivers of living water. And he was speaking of the Spirit that should come. It was at the day that they were doing the Feast of Tabernacles, and he was joyfully wanting men and women to be able to enjoy the Spirit of the living God. What kind of tone would that have been? A tone of invitation, a tone of joy, a tone of reception. He was in the middle of the crowd, and he wanted them to know that there is real water that could satisfy your soul. Now, I said it like this: come unto me, all you who are thirsty, and I'll give you living waters. I would have betrayed the text by a wrong tone. So whenever you're reading, you got to catch the tone. And I want you to catch the tone of these two young men who are tied to these nefarious groups and working on literature and doctrine to actually deceive the world. Because there is a psychosis, there is a pathology behind people who are working in kind of cultic or occultic, covert and kind of subversive systems. There's a pathology with them, and you need to know it. And it's a pathology radically different than the pathology of believers in the gospel. Let me see if I can go on just to clarify. He says here, oppressor and oppressed, they stood in constant opposition to one another. In my assessment, when I deconstruct that statement, guess what I raise? I say, I don't know if that's always true. First of all, I don't buy that the hierarchy of structural relationships in a business situation where you are working for a master is an oppressor-oppressed paradigm. I don't buy that as fair as an axiomatic interpretation. Do you follow me? It's important for you to know that. Important for you to know that. Don't always call your boss an oppressor. The Bible won't let you do that if your identity is right. It won't let you do that if your identity is right. If your identity is right in Christ, you won't be able to call a benevolent boss who thinks about you and tries to actually work with you to give you good pay so you can take care of your family. He won't let you call him an oppressor. That would be bearing false witness. Let me keep going. So it goes on to say, oppressor and oppressed stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended either in revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. You see how he sees the outcome? That you have the oppressor and the oppressed, and at some point they're going to fight. And in the fight, either the oppressor is going to win and take over the company, or both of them are going to lose and the company's going to get burned down. If I were to ask you what is the psychological tendency of his present drift, and I'm asking you that down the line, but if I were to ask you, what is Marx and Engels' present psychological disposition? Is it optimism or is it pessimism? It's important to catch that. It's important to catch that. Let me keep going. In the earlier epochs of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a manifold gradation of social rank. You see that? I pulled that out. A manifold gradation of social ranks. Why did you do that, Pastor? Because Marx is using a formulation for the observation of what we would call today simply hierarchical structures. Hierarchical structures. What do you mean by that? You're going to have an owner, right? You're going to have bosses. You're going to have associates. Then you're going to have workers in almost any business. Is that true? That's a hierarchical structure. Right? When you go in, you're going to have, on a job like, say, where you are working in an industry, you're going to have foremen. Then you're going to have the leaders over the foreman. Then you're going to have guys over them. And then you're going to have guys all the way up to the echelon. You know what Marx does? He says, this is horrible. This is bad. It shouldn't be this way. You gotta, now notice how he puts it, a manifold gradation of social rank. See, what I'm doing is doing what actually in many ways is what is called critical analysis of the text. I'm analyzing the mode in which he's expressing what are simply hierarchical systems in any kind of government. I could take that and apply that in the domestic context of the family. I could say that for the child, his mother and father are oppressors, and he's oppressed. Do you see where we are today around that? I'm trying to help you. So notice what he goes on to say. In ancient Rome, we have patricians, that is statesmen, knights, plebeians, that is workers, and then slaves. In the Middle Ages, we have feudal lords, vassals. Feudal lords are the people that basically rule the land. Vassals are the people that live there. Guild masters again, journeymen, apprentices, serfs again, people working the field. In almost all of these classes, again, what is he calling it? Subordinate gradation. Now, see, you have to be careful because this is what I meant by meta-narrative influence. Meta-narrative influence. All he sees are subject, oppressed people controlled by oppressors. He used the term here, subordinate gradations. But that's because he's a communist. And a communist presupposition does not see a hierarchical structure as legitimately working for the good of society. And again, what I'm saying to you is if I were to buy into this framework, I have to say the family is bad. All right, let me keep going. The modern bourgeoisie society, or what we call bougie society, that has sprouted from the ruins of feudal society has not done away with class antagonism. Here's what he's doing right now. He's condemning the present social structures that he's in. He's saying, you guys haven't solved anything in the French Revolution. You haven't solved anything in the American Revolution. Y'all still got your conflicts going on. He says that has sprouted from the ruins of the feudal society has not done away with class antagonism. It has but established new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. Our epic, the epic of the bourgeoisie, possesses, however, this distinct feature. Watch this. It has simplified class antagonism. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, the bourgeoisie or the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. What Marx has done, he's taken the categories that have come out of what I call the simple complex era of the post-revolution of France and America. He's broken up the categories and simply once again reduced them to elite ruling class over the common people. Elite ruling class over the common people. Does that follow? I'm just got to keep it right there. If we want to get into Q&A, we can unpack that more. But what he does not want to lose, he doesn't want to lose this dialectic. He wants to make sure you keep the dialectic going on. Hostile upper rulers against the poor, victimized peasant workers. And I'm going to be asking you a question in a moment. Let's go on. From the serfs of the Middle Ages. Remember again, the serfs there are again, the agricultural worker of the Middle Ages sprang the chartered burghers. You see the burghers there? Now what he's doing is showing you an ascent from the agricultural workers up to what would be called local politicians. The agricultural worker becomes a local politician, like an assemblyman. The agricultural worker becomes a burgher, okay? That's an assemblyman. There's a little bit of an ascent there. He's going to give you credit for a little bit of an ascent that you can work your way up out of just being a field servant if you are careful and if fortune helps you. Here's what he says. Of the earliest towns, from these burgesses, the first elements of the bourgeoisie were developed. So what he says here is, and this is so important, if you start off working at McDonald's and you end up being the manager there and you go to school and get your AA in business or in philosophy or in science and you get a job working where you can now move up into another category of financial success or financial approbation, then you have the criterion or resources to be influential in your society. because you've learned something about hard work. You made it up into another register of existence. Now you're more exposed to the practical local events that are going on in your culture. And now you want to be part of the assembly, part of the city council, which we have in our church. You know what Marx is saying? You're getting ready to buy out. He's telling you you're getting ready to buy out. Do you know why? Because you're working in the system. Y'all following me? Watch this. He says, the discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape. In fact, let me go back to that previous line to say one more thing, because there's a bigger picture here. When he says, from these burgesses, these people that have made it out of the field into kind of local government over the common people, the common businessmen, from these burgesses, the first elements of the bourgeoisie were developed. Bourgeoisie. He's saying now you are going to experience a level of financial power and a level of success that's actually going to allow you to have more influence over more territory. Because he's now getting ready to talk about, watch this, saints, economic growth. Economic growth. Here's what he says. The discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape, opened up fresh ground for the rising bourgeoisie. The East Indian and Chinese market, the colonization of America, trade with the colonies, the increase in the means of exchange and in commodities generally gave to the commerce, to the navigation, to the industry, an impulse never before known, and thereby to the revolutionary element in the tottering feudal society, a rapid development. Do you know what he's describing? I just told you. The Industrial Revolution. Now, he put it in terms, again, that couches the idea of a danger of growth, a danger of progress. You want to be careful not to grow too much. I think it's going to be problematic for you. And all he's describing is that once you continue sowing and reaping, you're going to sow and reap until you grow. You sow, you reap, you grow. You sow, you reap, you grow. And the Industrial Revolution began to actually permeate the world. And now you got to manage that growth. We all know something about that. If you've ever done anything right and have seen the fruit thereof, you have to manage that growth. Is that a bad thing intrinsically? Is it naturally immoral for one to experience growth on an economic level? And particularly, here we go, because this is really going to get into the issue. Suppose some of you, or you guys out there, have already experienced moving up from the field serf to the burgess, and maybe now have become a significant bourgeoisie, of bourgeoisie, as they want to call you. These are my French brethren, and that means that they are a little bit arrogant, and they were. Okay? The problem with Marx and Engels that they were Germans, and Germans are pessimistic, proud people. I know that for a fact. I got some lovely brethren who have already admitted it. They were there in Hitler's war that worshiped with us. They know Germans are proud. The French are arrogant. And Engels and Marx are proud and arrogant enough to determine the demise of the world and the solution to solve it. You actually have to be proud and arrogant to assume that you have the solution. I just want you to know that. Now watch this. It says, the feudal system of industry in which industrial production was monopolized by closed guilds, okay, now no longer sufficed for the growing wants of the what? New market. So you got guilds where you got 300 people on the guild, but business is booming. You don't get to now take the comfort of that 300 on the guild and keep giving them work, because now you need more workers for the supply. Now you're getting ready to open up the market broader and bring in people in a less discriminate fashion. Nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. And I would say nothing is wrong with that in your opinion either. You know why I would say that? Because you and I have been the blessed product of expansion and growth in marketing. Basically, what he's going to condemn when we get down the line, free trade. Are you guys hearing what I'm saying? Very important. Growing wants of the new market, the manufacturing system took its place. The guild masters were pushed on one side by the manufacturing middle class. Division of labor between the different corporate guilds vanished in the face of division of labor in each single workshop. Keep it moving, please. Meantime, the markets kept ever growing, the demand ever rising, even manufacture no longer suffice. Thereupon, steam and machinery revolutionized industrial product. The place of the manufacturer was taken by the giant. Modern industry, the place of the industrial middle class by industrial millionaires, the leaders of the whole world, industrial armies, the modern bourgeois. And he's painting a picture like that's all bad. Like there's some problems there. Stay with me, saints. Modern industry has established the world market for which the discovery of America paved the way. This market has given an immense development to commerce, to navigation, to communication by land. He hasn't yet understood airplanes because they were not developed. He has not yet understood the internet, which becomes if you and I were to talk about the dialectical process of socialism today versus socialism of its day, and how wrong Marx was in terms of the development of our world when it comes to technology and innovation and how it played a role in liberating us, he didn't ever see that because he was operating out of what kind of lens? A pessimistic lens. All he saw was doomsday. You guys got that? All he saw was doom. All he saw was slaves and victims. He didn't see any victors, because they weren't following his paradigm. For him, the solution is communism. He hated free trade. He hated capitalism. He hated hierarchical structures because he had no God theory in his philosophy. Do you guys understand that? He was atheistic. He was an atheist. Did that air conditioning get changed? Y'all all right? Y'all temperature cool? All right, good. He goes on, this market has given immense development to commerce, to navigation, communication by land. This development has in turn reacted on the extension of industry, and in proportion as industry, commerce, navigation, railways extended. In the same proportion, the bourgeoisie developed, increased its capital, and pushed into the background every class handed down from the Middle Ages. This is what is called the widening gap between the classes. All he's saying is there was a widening gap between the classes. Y'all follow that? In other words, the bourgeoisie is making money now. They living large. Like that's a problem. So now he's admitting that there will be a category of people who manage growth in such a way that they will enjoy more of the fruits of their labors than the people working for them, and there will be an expansive growth. That's what you often hear in politics about the 1%ers and the 10%ers. You hear that a lot. And everybody else is put in the poor victim category, which is a lie. Do you understand that? It's an absolute lie. It's important to see it too, because part of that lie is what's driving and fueling this fictitious identity politics agenda right now. It's very important. I'm telling some truth, and I know I'm making some people mad, but I just have to lay it out there. If we follow this logic carefully, if we actually are honest about ourselves, I thought about this because I want you to watch those 2 video clips I told you. I want you to watch them because you're going to see yourself in them. I want you to watch these masterful people who come from all these different spectrums, and you're going to see yourself in them. And you and I are going to have to ask some questions. It goes on to say, we see therefore how the modern bourgeoisie or modern bougie itself is the product of a long course of development. So, of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and exchange. He is defining what? Social progress. That's all. Social progress. Here we go. Each step in the development of the bourgeoisie was accompanied by a corresponding political advance of that class. Certainly true. I could just start talking to you from the beginning. First we have the family. Then we have the tribe. Then we have what are called the monarchs or the dynasties. And then we go from the monarchical dynastic period into more complicated systems of what is called democracy. And social constructs, largely democracies, because you can have a monarchical system with a local democratic process. That was Rome. They had emperors, but their structure was very democratic. You guys follow that logic? You can have that. You can have emperors who fight wars like we do with our president, and yet your a body politic can be senatorial representatives of the democracy of the people. I'm just letting you know that there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. An oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility. There it is again. An armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune. Here, independent urban republic, as in Italy and in Germany, their taxable third estate of the monarchy, as in France, afterwards in the period of manufacturing proper, serving either the semi-feudal or the absolute monarchy as a counterpoise against the nobility, and in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general, the bourgeoisie has at last, since the establishment of the modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself in the modern representative state. Whoa! Now we in America. Y'all got that? We're home now. Marx told us how we got here. Oppressed and oppressor. Now we get to work on the bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie here, and see what that looks like, because he's already categorized them in two groups. Exclusive political sway. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie historically has played a most revolutionary part. Here it is. Your politicians are complicit in the demise of your what? You see it? Right. I hope you can, because I'm following Marx. He's basically set you up to believe that the bourgeoisie don't care about the downline, and that they will even manipulate the downline to move progress. I actually know that's the case right now, because politics is a diabolical system that manipulates the masses to create outcomes. But that's the way that he sees it. He doesn't see a benevolent relationship between people who are in politics and people who are on the ground. He doesn't see it at all. Now let me go on. The bourgeoisie, wherever it has got upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors. I want you to see this. Bound man to his natural superiors. He says, this system of bourgeoisie over against the proletariat. Now you notice the proletariat hasn't come up yet, has it? Has it come up yet? It's about to come up. So what he's getting ready to do is finalize the classes. What he's saying here is the upper elites who have come from the ground up are operating in such crass power control that they are destroying everything natural and normal. Watch this. And has left remaining no nexus or ties between man and man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment. If you listen to your socialists talk today, the way they talk about Democrats and the way they talk about Republicans is that they're simply greedy money-making machines that have no empathy for the people. If you give us power, says the socialists, we will show much love to everybody, unlike the Democrats and unlike the Republicans. That is your dialectic. That is the dialectical outcome. Are you following me? The socialists, Bernie Ward and all of those guys will talk about how that they will manage the money better and make sure it's more equitable, and we'll give you free this and free that and free this. All you got to do is read the communist mandate. It'll show you what it says. Or the communist demands. It'll show you in communism is about taking everything and putting it in the power of the state, and they manage your whole life. And they promise you you're going to have a wonderful life. That's the outcome. There are several inferred flaws in that conclusion, aren't there? As a believer, wouldn't you know what they are? So we'll talk about that a little bit. He goes on to say, it has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, and of Philistine sentimentalism. Now, I know that's a little bit hard. I know that's a little bit. Y'all, did y'all understand that? Because I can keep going or else I can explain it. Raise your hand if you want me to explain what Marx just said. 1, 2, 3. So the rest of y'all smart enough to know it. All right, go back. I'm going to talk about the tail end of that for a moment because I want you to see this. This is what you do when you are begging the question in your argument. You create arguments that you actually know that you are not for, but you set them up in order to sway your auditors emotionally. Here's what he said. He says, all that the bourgeoisie is in for now is the money. They don't care about your family. They don't care about the relationship between men and women. They don't care about any of the normal things that we love, like religion and church and fellowship. They don't care about none of that. We do. Now watch this. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of what? What is he saying? He's saying you folks who go to church, who say you believe in God, and you love to sing and say, praise God, from whom all blessings flow, who rejoice in that this is the day that the Lord has made, and how that the Lord prospers us and blesses us when we work hard, right? We do all that, don't we? And we thank God for the blessing of that. He says that this system will ultimately strip you of that internal integrity. It'll make you so mad that you just throw off God. See it? Notice what else he says. Not only of religious fervors, of chivalrous enthusiasm. What is chivalry? It's the kind of politeness and care that we have towards our counterpart. Like, a man would respect a woman by tipping his hat, or getting out the way, or opening the door, making sure she understood that he respected her as a man. He respected her as a woman, him being a man. That those categories are extremely important in our world. That where you are operating out of that greedy, overt, nothing but interested in making money, now all of a sudden it's dog eat dog. I don't care nothing about that woman. I'll run her over to get what I need to get. That's the picture he's painting. Do you see it? He's saying we'll get to a point where we don't even see you as anything different. That's remarkable to me that he would want to draw that conclusion as an eschatological outcome, because we are making that policy right now in America. No distinction between men and women. Right? Are you guys following what I'm saying? This is so important for you to get, because about 30 to 40% of his prophecy, theirs, it's really rooted in pessimism that has no basis in reality. And why I keep using the word pessimism is because the ploy of politics is to get people who are pessimistic on the train of revolt. If you're too happy because God has been so good to you that you don't have time to get on that misery train, they ain't got time for you because they're looking for the sad person. They're looking for the mad person. They're looking for the angry person. They're looking for the narrow-minded person. They're looking for the person that's filled with a kind of self-morbid victimhood. They will not find the man or the woman that's walking in victory. They will not find the man or the woman that's free in Christ, free in themselves, confident in their skill sets, walking in the autonomy that God gave them. They will not find the man or the woman that actually knows the blessing of whatsoever man sows, that shall he also reap. And God blesses those that labor to that end, as long as they are living responsibly. They cannot sway the man or the woman who walks in optimism of faith and obedience in the laws of reciprocity. Now, I'm going to ask you as we get ready to deal with this latter part, as we're working our way through it. What kind of attitude should the Christian have? Should the Christian be a woe is me individual walking in victimization, talking about bondage and talking about trouble, always looking backwards and always blaming somebody else for their problems because they have been so deeply traumatized that they can't help themselves but be perpetually angry and hostile and blame shifting? Is that Christianity? See what I'm getting at? In a real way, as I was working through this, you know what I was saying? The Christian church has not done justice to the glory of God in telling the world how absolutely sufficient Christ is for us, to where we don't need politics. We can live in a world of politics, but we don't need it. The Christian church has not done enough to make that plain to the world. We may be able to help you. We are citizens. We have a right to vote, etc. We care about people around us. But watch this now. Christ is my president. And his governance has so sufficiently led me to where not only am I prospering in my walk with him, but I am a practically responsible citizen. I love paying my taxes. Don't like how much they take, but I love paying it, because as long as God gives me strength, I'm going to go to work the next day and I'm going to labor and ask for wisdom so God can prosper me and enlarge my territory. so I can give him glory for what he gave for me. But that puts me in a class that Marx hates. Do you understand what I just stated? It's important. It's very important. Chivalrous enthusiasm. Now he uses the term Philistine. Let's go. Philistine sentimentalism. Philistine sentimentalism. Do you guys know what that word means? I love it. He means a giant heart of compassion for the world. So the Philistine is big. Sentimentalism simply means that you are attached and connected to people at feelings. Am I teaching? Are y'all getting it? He's saying that when the system works, you lose care for people. That particular assumption is completely false in terms of what America does for people all around the world. Do you understand that the kind of charity discourse that we voluntarily engage in as America with the needs all around the world are matchless in every other nation? At the point in which I'm stating now, it becomes obvious to me that what we often do not do is have a healthy analysis of our own body politic as Americans and get the stats on what we do for people all around the world. Because one of the reasons why people can be uprooted from the gospel, i.e., in comparison, uprooted from a healthy view of what it means to be American, is to be ignorant of all that America does in terms of its care and protection and provision for so many nations around the world. One of the reasons when Trump came into office and realized we were giving money to all these nations and we wasn't getting nothing back, he said, we done with that. He said, we done with that until you guys step up to the plate and start showing some kind of reciprocal response and gratitude to us. Don't think we're going to just keep cutting you a check. Are you guys hearing what I'm saying? And they lined up too. Because you see, this is going to be my argument that communism will not work. If you keep just giving people something, they eventually will take it for granted. That's the way the system works. That's our natural heart. Philistine sentimentalism. Make me be that way, Lord. Help me to be so robustly caring about that which matters to you that my heart is large with giving. Large with giving. Remember what we learned last year at the beginning of the year and this year at the beginning of the year? God loves a what? Hilarious giver. In the icy waters of egotistical calculation, it has resolved personal worth into exchange values, and in place of the numberless indefeasible chartered freedoms. Let me see here. Louis, set the AC on warm 68. Warm 68. It may be on AC now. He goes on to say, chartered freedoms has set up that single unconscionable freedom. Now, notice what he says. Free trade is that single unconscionable freedom. Do you see that? Do I need to repeat that? He's getting at another one of his hateful objects. Free trade. Free trade. Marx sees free trade as the downfall of the human race. Because what his assumption is that all this is going to do is make the lords, the bourgeoisie, simply greedy for more money without caring for the downline. And the question we all have to ask is, since free trade came into existence, which is about almost 100 years ago, has it benefited our society at all? Anybody that has a business degree should be able to answer that fairly quickly, unless you've been skewed by a leftist education. Free trade has been phenomenally beneficial to the whole world. Just as simple as that. Watch how it goes. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal what? Exploitation. Oh, I'll stop right there and I will dance with Marx. I'll do a waltz with him. I'll do a waltz with Marx, okay? I'll do a waltz with him. Because I agree that there is a history of levels of exploitation and taking advantage of countries and pillaging them in certain ways at certain levels that are atrocious. I will not agree that that is the sum total of that process. I will not agree that there were not elements of benevolence, elements of care, elements whereby when we began to globalize the world, Industrial Revolution, that we didn't also bring with us education, bring with us resources, bring with us tools to take the people who are fundamentally ignorant and pagan up out of that paganism into a civilized culture. That's my argument. And Marx is going to confirm it. But he's hoping that you don't buy it because you're so pissed off that you're going to overlook the good that has been done. Y'all follow what I'm saying? Watch this. Marx saw vile religion mixed with politics. That's the thing I agree with him on. The religious beast, the great whore and the beast of Revelation 17. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into a what? Paid wage laborer. My statement. His negative assumption about the working class as what? Yeah. He never saw that people actually engaged in these processes willingly, volitionally, with the goal of creating better conditions for people around the world. He never admitted that there was a lot of good done in that process. All he wants you to see is greed and victimization. That's all he wanted to see. Very, very interesting. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil. And I go, which bourgeoisie class are you talking about? And has reduced the family relationship to a mere money relations. Do you see what he says? Now stay here because I'm getting ready to dance with him one more time. He is now giving a small hint towards slavery. So watch it carefully. You got to remember, you and I are reading this through a 21st century lens. You can't do that. Here's what he says. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil. What is the sentimental veil? The covenant. The unity of a husband and wife to raise a family on the bounds of love and commitment and sacrifice. He's ripped it apart, he says. They've ripped it apart in order to make money because now you are no longer a married couple. You are slave products for master. Do you see that? Did that open up? We can talk about it if you want to. I'm just telling you how I see it. Because certainly that did happen. Didn't it? That did happen. Quite frankly, not only did it happen in terms of slavery, but it happened also in terms of the New Deal when we brought in the welfare system. It happened again. The welfare system under the Democrats created a process by which economics could be employed to divide the family. It became statistics that allow a basic socialist system to put money in the pockets and maintain power for the Democrats while destroying the family. Those of us who are honest black people know that we contributed to our own demise there because we simply bought into letting the government take care of us. We bought into security over freedom. Did you guys follow what I just stated? I admit, I grew up in it. I know exactly what that's talking about. It's quite a fascinating thing. And ultimately, Bill Clinton had to pull it away. Do you know why he had to pull it away? Because there was no more money to be able to put into it. Because you can never have prosperity where people don't work. You're just giving people everything. Eventually, it all dries up. This is where communism will not work. I'm looking forward to talking about it. It won't happen fully tonight, but the Marxist ultimate conclusion for how to solve the world's problem called utopia is an absolute delusion. All right, let me keep going. So he says, slave-owning, godless capitalist masters. If so, it is not about blacks. Why? Because today Marx must condemn, pull it up, any business owner of the same atrocity of mere money relations. Say, Pastor, help me with that because y'all didn't see the connection, right? Did you miss that? Did y'all miss that? Go back a second. I'm going to show you something. So for Marx, what he did, he played on the sentimental emotionalism of people around the slave issue. He's talking about slavery now because you can go to Marx and learn about slavery as he deals with Capital. He deals with it under Capital, okay? He deals with it. What I want you to know is he doesn't give a hoot about slaves because he's an atheist. He's an agnostic. An atheist, not an agnostic. For him, this is all about an end goal. But he will use the pulling on the heartstrings of individuals about look how bad it is for the bourgeoisie to now take people and make them slaves and split families up and send kids down the road. And what I said was, if that's so, it's not about blacks. Because there were all kind of slave systems going on. Anybody want to talk about it? All kind of slave systems beyond blacks. One. And because today Marx must condemn any business owner of the same atrocity of mere money relations. Y'all follow? Y'all trucking with PJ? Watch this. If you've owned a business and your business operates out of the fundamentals of free market, and you've hired people at the typical wages in which people work, for Marx, you're bougie, and you're creating the perpetuation of that slave system. That's for Marx. See, because I'm going to bring it home as we're working it through. I'm going to ask you, are you bougie or proletariat? In your experience of life, are you bougie or proletariat? Are you part of the people on the ground that's struggling to make it? According to Marx, if you own a house, according to Marx, if you got a little bit of savings, according to Marx, if you actually have some kind of small business that you're engaging in where you are able to bless people, or in a secondary way, invest in companies that do so, guess what? You're part of the condemned bourgeoisie. You're condemned. Right, because you're complicit with the system. Y'all following me for a moment? He telling you, don't you ever own a business. Don't you ever own 2 homes. You better not own a car. Because you can't be happy if you do that. Because you're taking from somebody else. This is very important because right about what I'm doing now is setting you up to show you how that if you buy into the present neo-Marxist cultural revolutionary argument, they basically at their premise want you to recognize the guilt of being complicit in the system of the bourgeoisie. This is why a lot of the politicians are collapsing. This is why a lot of the people way at the top are collapsing and bowing the knee now. Anybody following me? It's very important to see. Very important to see. The bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admire, found it fitting compliment in the most slothful indolence. It's really funny because, again, if you just take your time and read it, he makes anybody that owns any kind of business that does any kind of successful empire some kind of slothful indolence. I can tell when he's writing that he's getting upset. Have y'all ever written anything in a long dissertation and got involved emotionally in it and found yourself writing in a very highly subjective fashion? You know you got to watch out, Miss Lawyer, for that, right? And then you got to back up, don't you? And look at it and go, too much heat there. Got to back down and reframe it in more objective terms so that you don't mislead. He doesn't care right now. Because he's banking on the proletariat for being so upset that they will be compelled by his argument that the whole world is in misery just like him. Bear with me a little bit longer because I want us to get to the conclusion. The bourgeoisie has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, which reactionaries so much admire, found it fitting compliment in the most slothful indolence. It has been the first to show what man's activity can bring about. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egypt, pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and the Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put in the shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades. He's now now parading. This is what I call the parading of a glorious history minus the atrocities that lead to it. He's now simply telling you about all of the benefits and advancements that have come out of the Industrial Revolution and the things that we have accomplished. And he's now at this point not touching on the atrocities because he already has people's hearts on that. The bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly what? Revolutionizing the instruments of production and thereby the relations of production and with them the whole relations of society. Conservatism, conservation of the old modes of production in unaltered form was on the contrary the first condition of existence for all earlier industrial classes. Constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation distinguish the bourgeoisie epoch from all earlier ones. All fixed, fast forms of relations with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions are swept away. All new formed ones become antiquated before they can ossify, that is petrified. All that is solid melts into air. All that is holy is profane. And man is at last compelled to face with sober senses his real condition of life and his relations with its kind. And I quote, vanity of vanities is what you draw when you don't know God. See, what Marx did was wax eloquent in his preaching about the demise of the human race. And again, he's skewing the real vision. It's godless. I don't have time to go back to interpret it. Let's move on to the next one. The need of a constantly expanding market for its product chases the bourgeoisie over the entire surface of the globe. What do we call it? Globalism. It must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. The bourgeoisie has, through its exploitation of the world market, given a cosmopolitan character to production and consumption in every country. To the great chagrin of reactionists, it has drawn from under the feet of industry the national ground on which it stood. All old established national industries have been destroyed or are daily being destroyed. They are dislodged by new industries whose introduction becomes a life and death question for all civilized nations by industries that no longer work up indigenous raw materials, but raw materials drawn from the remotest zones, industries whose products are consumed not only at home, but in every quarter of the globe. In place of the old wants satisfied by the production of the country, we find new wants requiring for their satisfaction the products of distant lands and climes. In place of the old local and national seclusion and self-sufficiency, we have intercourse in every direction, universal interdependence of nations. And as in material, so also in intellectual production, the intellectual creations of individual nations become common property. National one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become more and more impossible. And from the numerous national and local literatures, there arises a world literature. What is he calling it? One world government. All right. That's what I'm calling it. Now watch this. I need to just do a caveat here for you. What he's basically is saying is, because we now have become global, in his view, it destroyed every kind of national identity, national interaction, national business. What he's arguing for is you should fear globalism because globalism will take away your national identity. Well, insofar as you and I are concerned, we're already global. Like, you and I are so used to globalism. We have benefited from globalism. We wouldn't want to go back to everything being totally national. Now, I know you hear that. I know you hear it. I know you hear it in the argument of the pump cart dialectic, right? Let's make everything in America. Let's do it all here. We don't want to do no global enterprises. Screw China. Do it all here. You don't want to do that, child of God. You don't want to do that, child of God. You don't want to buy into that dialectical lie. You want your children to know the whole world, everything about the world. You want them to be aware of the global, integrated relationships that produces so many opportunities for us to be advanced in terms of our worldview, clear on the beautiful diversity of cultures and economies and languages and productivity in each one of those countries. You want your kids to have that all at your availability, and it can only happen through globalism. The moment you go back to hyper-nationalizing, you close the door on knowledge. The moment you go back to hyper-nationalizing, you close the door on knowledge. I'll give you an example. Give me a country that's communist. Huh? China. Give me another one. Russia. In both of those countries, do they control the information outlet? Absolutely. Yeah, they do. With the exception of, watch this, with the exception of this new institution called Internet. Well, I know that, but I'm going to talk about why. So Marx doesn't know anything about Internet. He doesn't know anything about the transnational boundaries of telecommunication. He doesn't know, right? He doesn't know. He doesn't know that we all benefit from not having to fly to another country to learn about that country. He doesn't know that. But even in China, it's a one-way conversation. So when China does not want its people to know what's going on out there, it can cut the information off. Same thing in Russia. Okay. So Chinese people they can actually talk among themselves, but they control vast measures of their internet. China and Russia. You need to know that. But quite frankly, I know I'm a little aside, but I want you to get this. They do that with us now. You don't know it, but it's happening now. They block data. They block information now. They're blocking data, blocking information now, because information leads to knowledge. Knowledge leads to freedom, because now you can make objective choices. We don't want the world closed down anymore. You understand what I'm saying? It's very important. Next one. The bourgeoisie, by the rapid improvement of all instruments of production, by the immensely facilitated means of communication, draws all, even the most barbarian nations, into what? All right. See what he did? He undercut his argument for me. You know what he just said? By virtue of globalism, you take the barbarian and you make him civilized. Like, that's a problem. Right? See? Follow the logic. What Europe did and what America did 200 years ago, 250 years ago, when they went into different countries, they sent educators into those countries. They sent missionaries into those countries. Do those countries where barbarians are Marx and Engels, because they are agnostic or atheists, don't have a category for missionary work at that level. They see that as no significant point. But what did our master say? Go ye into what? And is it possible that he has allowed us to go into all the world by the advancement of technology, by globalism, by the invention of technology that required the interdependency of all nations, creating airplanes and technology from China and other parts of the world, India, as we come together, put things together. It allows us to do global activity in a much more effective way. Does that make sense? And it all facilitates the gospel. We don't want to change that. We don't want to change that. It says here, the cheap prices of commodities are the heavy artillery with which it batters down all Chinese walls, with which it forces the barbarians' intensely obstinate hatred of foreigners to capitulate. It compels all nations on the pain of extinction to adopt the bourgeois mode of production. It compels them to introduce what it calls civilization into their midst. That is, to become bourgeois themselves. Oh, poor nations. In one word, it creates a world after its own image. Economic master-slave paradigm. Y'all already follow the track, right? You see where you go. You know he's singing to his choir now, right? He's singing to a choir that he believes are already persuaded to be pessimistic, but you and I are reading it from a communist failure mode and a successful mode of free trade in a capitalist system that also allows the gospel to go forth so that many of us are civilized Christians in a country of relative freedom. See, we're reading it from the standpoint of victory. We're not reading it from the standpoint of being a what? If I was a victim in a country that was poor and pillaged and tore up and destroyed, I might buy Marxist philosophy. If I thought the whole world was going through what I was going through, I might buy it. If I had never been taught the progress that was made from 1848 when this was written to where we are now, I might buy that the whole world is a mess. But see, if I had time, and I don't, if you were really looking at the statistics, ladies and gentlemen, as to the progress that's being made all around the world, in Africa, in India, in Asia, I mean the serious progress, which you don't get to hear in our social media because they don't want you to believe that people are getting down, handling their business, making money, living well. They want you to believe the whole world's about to fall apart. It is not true. You don't have Africans over in Africa, even in the Congo. And there are a lot of atrocities that got committed. You don't have Africans wanting to rise up and come beat America up or Europe for the plundering of their resources. You don't have that. Even though they could. You know why they don't? Because they have experienced the fruits and benefit of the interaction of nation dynamics. Africa is on the verge of being a major first-class country. And I see it through biblical eyes. I'm not lost. Do you hear me, Stefan? I'm not lost. I understand the importance of free trade in terms of God bringing people to a place of them recognizing how good God has been. It is the goodness of God that lead men and women to salvation. Let me keep going. The bourgeoisie has subjected the country to the rule of the towns. It has created enormous cities. Okay. It has greatly increased the urban population as compared with the rural and has thus rescued a considerable part of the population from the idiocy of rural life. There you go. Oh, my boy telling on himself. He waxing again, very ethnocentric. The idiocy of folks who live out on the farmland. Got it? Idiots. You guys got that? Did you catch the tone? So funny. When you meet an elitist, a real elitist, if you ever met one and you're just in their company for a while because they're on a mission, and they will talk very nice, very cordial, very respectful to you until they have a condition where they can drop their guards. Like if y'all go out and eat and have a little something to drink, you know what I'm saying. And they just kind of loosen up a little bit. They will tell what's in their heart. Have I ever told the story about the French pastor that we allowed to come to grace one time? He had the audacity to call some folks nigger in the pulpit. Yeah. I said, that won't happen again. You understand? He got comfortable. He got comfortable. Because that's what they do in their country. They're free. This is where we have to rise to the level of being Christian, because I talk to us about this all the time. I will never, ever be a pastor over an ethnocentric church. You will not have me as your pastor if the center of your identity is your ethnicity. It won't happen. You're not going to get me to condone you in private calling people niggas or calling people honkies or calling people whatever and somehow think that we can actually tolerate that as Christianity. Did you hear what I just stated? It won't happen. I'll go back to work. Real quick, it won't ever happen. So just don't ever expect me to get trapped by identity politics, because it is completely a subordination of the gospel. Plus, I'm looking out at my beautiful folks right here, and can I tell you something? With the exception of one, if it wasn't for the cross-pollination, y'all wouldn't be here. Do you hear what I just stated? So the idea of splitting it down the middle and making it white and black, the moment we buy into that, we are hypocrites. Straight up hypocrites and condemning ourselves. So the bourgeoisie has subjected the country to all of this stuff, idiocy of the rule, just as it has made the country dependent on towns, okay? So it has made, you got to keep up with me, sis. So it has made the barbarian and semi-barbarian countries dependent on the civilized ones. Nations of peasants on nations of bourgeoisie, the East and the West. The bourgeoisie keeps more and more doing away with the scattered state of the population, of the means of production and of property. It has agglomerated or gathered together population, centralized the means of production, and has concentrated property in a few hands. Now that becomes a problem. The necessary consequences of this was political centralization. We get that. Independent or but loosely connected provinces with separate interests, laws, governments, and systems of taxation became lumped together in one nation with one government, one code of laws, one national class interest, one frontier, and one customs tariff. What country is he describing right now? America. This is home. He hates what we are. Do you hear me? He hates what we are. The bourgeoisie during its rule of scarce 100 years has created more massive and more colossal productive forces than have all preceding generations together. Subjection of nature's forces to man, machinery, application of chemistry to industry and agriculture, steam navigation, railways, electric telegraphs, clearing of whole continents for cultivation, canalization of rivers, whole populations conjured out of the ground. What earlier centuries had even a presentiment that such productive forces slumbered in the lap of social labor. And that should be colored in. Why not vigorous capitalism? Because what he just described was globalism again. But why not vigorous capitalism? That should be put in red. What do I mean by that? For him, all he can see is the mammoth of business changing the landscapes and changing the dynamics of cultures, basically civilizing them, and he doesn't like that. But that's where we are now. We see then the means of production and of exchange and of whose foundation the bourgeoisie built itself up were generated in feudal society. At a certain stage in the development of these means of production and of exchange, probably locking up on us. It's okay. Probably is locking up. At a certain stage in the development of it, the conditions under which feudal society produced and exchanged the feudal organizations, agriculture, manufacturing industry, in one word, the feudal relations of property became no longer compatible with the already developed product forces. They became so many fetters. They had to be burst asunder. They were burst asunder. Into their place stepped free competition, accompanied by a social and political constitution adapted in it and the economic and political sway of the bourgeois class. A similar movement is going on before our eyes. Modern bourgeoisie societies with its relations of production, of exchange, and of property, a society that has conjured up such gigantic means of production. Am I going back over that? An exchange is like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the power of the netherworld, whom he has called up by his spells. Notice how he avoids God. He'll acknowledge demons as producing the global expanse, because he wants you to associate the expanse with darkness. For many a decade past, the history of industry and commerce is but the history of revolt of modern productive forces against modern conditions of production, against the property relations that are the conditions for the existence of the bourgeoisie and of its rule. It is enough to mention the commercial crisis that by their periodical return put the existence of the entire bourgeoisie society on its trial, each time more threatening. What is he talking about? Market analysis and its instability, causing people to look out and say, if we don't make more products, if we don't get more people buying, our whole economy is going to collapse, right? That's what he's saying. You and I have been living with that for hundreds of years now. Market analysis is absolutely necessary to see how goods and trades are working. So yeah, you might sometimes, we have these ups and downs, don't we? We have these ups and downs. But does that mean, do we want to get rid of this model of government that we're operating out of? And these crises, a great part not only of the existing products, but also of the previously created productive forces are periodically destroyed. In these crises, there breaks out an epidemic that in all earlier epochs would have seemed an absurdity. The epidemic of overproduction. Society suddenly finds itself put back into a state of momentary barbarism. It appears as if a famine, a universal war of devastation had cut off the supply of every means of subsistence. Industry and commerce seems to be destroyed. And why? Because there is too much civilization, too much means of subsistence, too much industry, too much commerce. The productive forces at the disposal of society no longer tend to the further development of conditions of bourgeois property. On the contrary, they have become too powerful for these conditions by which they are fettered. And as soon as they overcome these fetters, they bring disorder into the whole bourgeois society, endanger the existence of the bourgeois property. The conditions of bourgeois society are too narrow to comprise the wealth created by them. I reject that assumption, but he doesn't know. Because we're in the 21st century now. He only saw 100 years of the Industrial Revolution, and he saw it falling apart. What he said was they won't be able to handle the growth. It was a plain lie. And how does the bourgeois get over these crises? On the one hand, they enforce destruction of a mass of productive forces. On the other, by the conquest of new markets, and by more through exploitation of old ones. That is to say, by paving the way for more extensive and more destructive crises, and by diminishing the means whereby crises are prevented. This is your crisis dialectic of war for profit. Do you understand what he just said right there? What he's recognizing is that over time, big governments have to create crisis in order to normalize. And sometimes you go to war to do that. War is a for-profit business. He recognizes that. Think about it. When an economy like ours gets in trouble, we find a reason to go to war with somebody, and it gets everybody highly patriotic. And then it opens up doors for enthusiasm for creating things. This is how we came out of World War II. He's recognizing that element of it. The weapons with which the bourgeois failed feudalism to the ground are now turned against the bourgeois itself. Now, I want you to see this because this is bringing us to home where we are now. The weapons with which the bourgeoisie failed feudalism, destroyed feudalism to the ground, are now turned against the bourgeoisie itself. But not only has the bourgeoisie forged the weapons that bring death to itself, it has also called into existence the men who are to wield those weapons and the modern working class. These are what's the word? Proletarians. By what means? Revolt. Now your proletarians have been brought back up. What he's getting ready to do is show you now how that the proletariat is that new company that's going to tear everything down and bring us into a communist system. Because he just told you how globalism is going to just demise. It's not going to work. And the people on the ground, they're going to change it. This here is your dog whistle to all your Marxist revolutionaries. That's your dog whistle. Here it is. In proportion as the bourgeoisie, that is the capital, is developed in the same proportion as the proletariat. The modern working class developed a class of laborers who live only so long as they can find work, who find work only so long as their labors increase capital. These laborers who must sell themselves piecemeal are the commodity like every other article of commerce and are consequently exposed to all the vicissitudes of competition, to all the fluctuations of the market. This is what I call Marxist what? Pessimism. You know what he just said about you and me? He says, all we do is live to pay the bills. You see what he's done? He's narrowed down what God has proven to be a lie on his part. He's narrowed down the experience of people who start at level 1 to nothing but getting up every day, hitting the clock, and just barely paying the bills. That is not true for me. Raise your hand if it's not true for you. Right. So the reason I'm making you do this is because what I want you to see is that What you're going to have to do, saints, what you're going to have to do is tell the truth about how good God has been to you. You're going to have to tell the truth about how he has allowed many of us to rise up out of the slavery mentality, out of the plantation mentality of being trapped and upset and pissed off and angry that nobody gave me an opportunity. Nobody allowed me to rise above and nobody allowed me to breathe. That's wrong. So wrong. It's so unbiblical. As I was going through Mark's, I was thinking about this congregation. Our pastor is going the complexion is going to change once COVID is over. I know that. But you know what? And the complexion is not ethnic. The complexion is going to change because of the dynamics of what we're going through. What I recognize when I worked through the manifesto one more time is that virtually everybody at Grace is guilty of being part of the bourgeoisie class. Virtually everybody at Grace. Virtually everybody at Grace has experienced the elevation of hard work and the ability to actually aspire to successes that does not fit into the positive communist paradigm. And that's my kids. They made it through high school. They made it through college. They've got great jobs. They're on the brink of owning home and owning property and helping people. They're already doing that because as believers, that's what we do, right? But not one of my kids is crying and whining that there's some kind of victim. And I don't know any of the children at Grace that are doing that. And I don't know any of the adults at Grace that don't know that if they want to, they can entrepreneur their way right up out of any kind of proletariat paradigm that would be foisted on them. And the next thing they know, they can be helpful to other people in the bourgeoisie position. I know too many people at Grace who are in positions of power working in the hierarchical systems who have done great in terms of making all kind of income and money and are on boards of helping people in charitable organizations. But see, Marx does not see that kind of person because the new man for Marx is one new man. Do you know what it's called? Communism. He stole that from Christ. I'm taking you to the end of his system before we even get there to show you he's building a new man called the communist man in antithesis of the Christian man because he doesn't believe in God. And here's what's scary about it. The movement that I said on the pump cart of plantation politics is moving the whole world towards a communist man. The commune of an eclectic of all kind of people under one banner, under one political ideology, under one identity that has nothing to do with God, has nothing to do with Christ. Now, Marx would have never accepted the intersectionality that's taking place in our culture. He would have never seen what is happening with his system because for him, he was only wrapped up in two things, the class struggle of the upper and the lower. He's not looking at individuation. He's not looking at people. He's not looking at ethnic groups. He's not looking at the beauty and splendor of human relationships. He's not looking at that. He's reduced everything like politics down to numbers. And this is why the conclusion is inevitable here. Watch this. Owing to the extensive use of machinery into the into the division of labor, the work of the proletarians has lost all individual character. Is that the way it was for you? Notice what he says. Owing to the extensive use of machinery into the division of labor, the work of the proletarians has lost all individual character. What he's asserting is you will be so oppressed by work that all you're doing is kind of on an assembly line, just doing parts. Because he's getting ready to talk about machines taking over. And right now I'm thinking about Tesla. And guess what I'm thinking about on Tesla? My godly son-in-law, who's working there right now to take care of his wife and soon to be 7 kids. And doing it by faith in Christ ready to talk to that other person that's standing on the other side of him about the Lord Jesus Christ, because that's what he's going to talk about if they get to talk for a minute. Now, like in the Tesla place, you get to violate the social distancing order because we got to make those parts. But Newsom ain't looking at that because he wants the tax money. But he's still pushing socialism. And pushing socialism will destroy the free market, hierarchical, structural system of democracy. And yet what we do with it, we get right next up to people that we don't know, and we wait for an opportunity to share the gospel while we're working together. You see what I'm getting at? That's how Christians have been able to live in these systems. They live with a purpose. They're not bowed down by this stuff. He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple, most monotonous, and most easily acquired knack that is required of him. Hence, the cost of production of a workman is restricted almost entirely to the means of subsistence that he requires for the maintenance and for the propagation of his race. Marx is describing his own solution. He's letting you know how to solve it. But the price of a commodity, and therefore also of labor, is equal to its cost of production. In proportion, therefore, as the repulsiveness of the work increases, the wage decreases. Nay, more, in proportion as the use of machinery and division of labor increases, in the same proportion, the burden of toil also increases, whether by prolongation of the working hours, by the increase of the work exacted in the given time, or by increased speed of machinery, etc. Before I touch on that, I want to ask you a question. Do you see that dilemma of working and under the present circumstances, not making as much money as you need to pay your bills, right? Y'all see that dilemma? What would you do in that situation? Would you be stuck? Would you say, I can do nothing else but live in the white knuckle fear that if I don't make enough to pay my bills, I'm just going to fall to the wayside? Would you be stuck? Would you? Because he wants you stuck. He doesn't want you to have any kind of other option, because watch this, child of God, you're not free. You're not free. Remember, you're what? Victim and a slave. You're not free. You can't go, you know what? Thank you, Lord, for this job. You know it's not paying as much. So give me grace to do what? Get my hustle on. Do you hear me? Get my hustle on. I'm looking at my sister who loves the gospel sitting up front right here. And I remember when she first came to the Bay Area, Charlie, she came here fairly broke, having to live with somebody else. And I was praying for her because she came in with Jesus on her lips. We heard her before we saw her with her bad self. And, you know, as we always do, we pray for and we watch to see whether or not the Lord will give people grace to operate in their freedom and demonstrate their giftedness. You know, my girl got a little pittance job here and a little pittance job there. And she started working hither and working yon. And she would come to church every week thanking God, even though she was barely making it, just knowing God would take her to the next level. And then over time, she found another job added to that job. And she would come to church and thanking God for taking her to the next level to let her work 2 jobs. Then she was able to take those 2 jobs and combine them into one job, paying a better price than both of those 2 jobs because she was just a hustler, and God opens the doors for hustlers. And the next thing you know, the girl bought her a car. She come driving to church up in her car, shouting and praising God, thanking God for how good he is. And she kept in prayer. She stayed in the prayer house when we were just a small little group of prayer brothers and sisters. And my sister Deb just kept at it. And the next thing you know, that sister driving a Cadillac. But you know what she did not do? She did not stop worshiping God, did not stop coming to church, did not stop coming to prayer, because she knew it was God from whom all those blessings flow. And she never counted herself as a victim. Never counted herself as a victim. Did she go through hell? Yes, she went through hell. Did she go through trials? Yes, she did. I'm a pastor. I know what she went through. I know the battle she fought. I know the depression that hit her. I know the temptations to kind of, meander here and there. I saw it. Praying for my girl all the time. And you know what God has done? He's caused her to triumph in Christ. All she knows is that the Lord has been good to her. He has kept her all the way up to this hour. And she's simply a representation of so many of us whom God has been good to, just like that, over and over and over again. She could not qualify to be your proletariat victim, walking in fear, trapped by indecisiveness, and becoming a proof for the Marxist system of communism. Y'all understand what I'm saying? I really almost want to push this to the end because I'm scared you guys are going to die having to sit here so long. Modern industry has converted the little workshop of the patriarchal master, there it is, now you're getting mad, into the great factory of the industrial capitalist. Masses of laborers crowded into the factory are organized like soldiers as privates of the industry army. They are placed under the command of a perfect hierarchy of officers and sergeants. Not only are they slaves of the bourgeois class, see how he calls them slaves? And of the bourgeois state, they are daily and hourly enslaved by the machine, by the overlooker above, and by the individual bourgeoisie. He's always painting the picture of the factory, right? With the foreman looking down on people like if he got a gun or a pistol, like if you're in prison. He doesn't see any other category of creative relationship that free people have operated out of, by which we have both honored God and have enjoyed the fruits of life. Did y'all understand that last statement that I made? He has no idea of the creative dynamic of how free people have operated, by which we have created all kinds of jobs and have prospered in so many ways because we are free people. He does not see that. And yet it is a common reality for us as Americans, stay with me, and for us as black people too. We already know that for our Caucasian brothers and sisters who aren't lazy and indolent as well, because they would fall between the cracks too. Success is not an issue of color. It's an issue of character. Would you agree? All right, so I'm going to stop right there just because I just want to actually have a little closure, and I'll take it up next week. What you guys actually have in your outline on the back page, and I really do want to finish because it's a dreadful outcome that he paints, but that dreadful outcome actually is what's around the corner if our country falls apart. There's no doubt about it. But in your outline, I want to make some observations. And then I'll, let me find the one that has, here we go. Oh, okay. In the outline, you should have on the back of your pump car paradigm, should be something like the Marxist era. You guys see that? Good. All I want to do is kind of give you a run through of how I see it in this outline. What you can do is you can look at it. We're going to conclude after this, and I want to let you just take it home, and next week we will jump back into it. For those of you guys who are watching, I know a lot of you are, you probably have been extremely surprised by the Communist Manifesto, and you probably have just maybe been bothered by my inserting into it some of the things that I did, but I just thought it was probably necessary to make a correlation between that time and not now, particularly speaking to the emphasis of Marx's pessimistic view. I say all that to say this: write me your questions if you want to. We're going to definitely pick up next Friday, but please do me a favor. Make sure you watch the two videos the YouTube videos that I recommended, and I will state them again. Two of them. One is by Puff Daddy, and I know that sounds wild, but I need you to watch it. The Revolt Summit of 2019. The Revolt Summit of 2019. The eclectic group of African Americans that are on that stage is a good representation of the diversity of people and thinkers that will help you see where I'm coming from. It will be people like T.I. It will be people on there like Killer Mike. It will be other prominent like wealthy young African American women and men. It will be people on the right, like our right now prominent Candace Owens, who is running real hard for the what I call conservatives. You definitely want to hear her out because she gets into it with T.I. And then another brother comes up and so defends her clarity of understanding that it serves as a perfect model of what I deal with. And I want you to see how it's going to start off very tense and very argumentative, because that's how we do it as black people. And I told you, wear your hazmat, because they not coming with Christian censorship. It's going to get just kind of funky, but you won't lose the content. Do you hear me? You will not lose the content. The content is going to be there from the very beginning, and you're going to be taken on an emotional ride, but at the end of it, they will do something that if that could be modeled everywhere, we would solve the mystery of iniquity that keeps the dialectic, keeping our people divided. We would solve it. If you see how the outcome of that occurs, it's like beautiful. And it will not look like that could happen. It will look like the mob just wants to run up on stage and eat our girl up. But there's some partners on that stage who you will not even think has the insights that will bring clarity to the era of some of the leftist thinking and bring affirmation to the right thinking so that they can come together. It's going to be beautiful. The other one I want you to watch is called The Most Important Conversation of 2020. The most important conversation of 2020 YouTube event, Black History Panel, and read and watch the full version. It too is an eclectic of African American men and women of all ages and all ages, and they also are eclectic, and they actually do have a much more Christian framework to it. So you can take your hazmat suit off and enjoy it, because what I like about their dialogue is, as African Americans, we get tense with each other. They are reasonable. They're not inflammatory. They don't get off track. They don't argue irrelevantly, because they're intelligent. They went to school. They finished up. They got it. They made it. They would be guilty of Marx's bourgeoisie class. And they understand the errors of the system. And those would be good people as representatives that I would want my black and my white and my Asian brothers and sisters to watch, because they're such good thinkers. And it's important to know that you actually have really good thinking black people out there who are able to rise above, because what you're going to discover is somebody going to tell you in that summit, the Revolt Summit, they're going to tell you what I'm telling you. And I want you to I'm not going to tell you who it is. I want you to tell me next week who the person is that rises up and says, you got to make it off the plantation, so that everything that you work for is not taken from you. It's going to be a kind of vindication of my labors around this with people that don't think clearly. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just kind of like walk through these 4 points, particularly for those of you who are online. Just walk through them, not going to comment. For the Marxist era, the Marxist era for me is that, first of all, he has no interest in personal relationships. No interest in personal relationships. People are not seen as people, that is, substantial individuals. Personal relationships have no variable impact on his model. If he had to include personal relations, it would impact his model. Their goal was to raise class consciousness, that is, poor, marginalized, class consciousness. Second, his system produces identity politics groups. Hierarchical classes designed only to contend, not to collaborate. Contend, not to collaborate. He my boss, I want to tear him down. A personal subdivisional process takes place until there is what is called in logic absolute individuation. And it's logically intersectionalism. What we have today is a division into all these different categories as a consequence of of identity politics. If all we were was just black, that would be one thing. But we're black female, we're black male, we're black gay, we're black trans, we're black plus, and that begins to subdivide infinitely. And then once it's called intersectionality. And once that happens, they start now vying for their own rights within the system. It's a self-condemning process. It can't help it. His system is also absent of a love, redemption, covenant, reality paradigm. His system is absent of a love, redemption, covenant, reality paradigm. As Christians, we see love and redemption in our lives. We see a covenant paradigm with us in Christ that allows us to be able to recognize that there are redemptive components to our world, that we don't want to kill ourselves. Do you see that? He doesn't have that in his system. It therefore avoids personal responsibilities. For example, the naive daughter Eve the naive daughter Eve did not, in his opinion, disobey loving provisional Father God. That's too personal. So you know how your Bible created mankind in the beginning and how profoundly personal that relationship was? Personal. Naive daughter Eve, in his system, did not disobey this heavenly, loving, provisional Father, because that model won't work. For him, it was feminine humanity dislodged itself from divine hierarchical oppression. Got it? Got it? So now she has to be lifted up and made an identity marker. And all God is an oppressive master. So category A is a biblical worldview, isn't it? Right? Naive daughter Eve did disobey loving, provisional Heavenly Father. Is that the category we hold? We hold a biblical worldview. We say that God created us in his image, right? We're not the products of protozoa. And that what happened to our world was the consequence of naive daughter Eve. That's how we view it. We actually believe that God has a relationship with us. We're not just a number. I didn't want to do this. But what I'm trying to show you is the subtlety of the era of identity politics over against a biblical worldview. Category B is a humanist, satanic worldview. Point number 4. In its logical conclusion, statism is merely what is called group communistic authority. Follow the logic. The godless communions must submit to the state. The godless communions must submit to the state. That's the end of communism. Y'all do know the end of the read. Have you read it to its end? Have you read it to its end? Do you know that all that Marx saw was a kind of weird state that is going to make you work, take all your money, and then disperse to you what you need, where you need it? That sounds like Bernie Sanders. I'm sorry. It sounds like the next stage that's coming. Its logical conclusion is statism. Statism meaning the state is God. The godless communion must submit to the state. The people are reduced to no individual servants. And I got the slash there because you are the proletariat. You're not individual people, you're the proletariat. And in this community, you are the people that the state is going to serve, but you have no individuality. You're just a number in a group that actually does what he's been condemning the whole time. Go to work, give your money to Uncle Sam, he'll make sure you have an apartment. It's a fascinating thing to read it. Read it all the way through and it'll just make you cringe. God is not the thesis for socialism, nor men in general, but the man state, or what I call the Antichrist system. God is not the thesis for socialism, because Marxism are a socialist trying to bring a solution to their socialist problem, which is communism. So for him, God is not their thesis. For the socialists, the thesis is the man state. Remember what I told you? The new man is the whole system. That's how he puts it. So underneath, you might see those 3 points. Materialists, not theologians. That's what Marx is. He has no category for God as a supreme solution. He adopts Hegel's view of God, which was merely propositional and then ultimately, inevitably, communal also. I've taught us this before. Friedrich Hegel saw the world in a progression through conflict. He saw these cycles happening. But here's how he defined them, coming up out of the church as an apostate, as was Marx, as was Engels, as was many of them, because they were Enlightenment philosophers. That means they stopped believing in God. Here's what Hegel said. Hegel said, in the old feudal systems going all the way back to before the monarchies, all the way back to the beginning of time, you had the father motif because it was all patriarchal. The father motif. So he says God was really the patriarchal paradigm. There was no real God. It was just the patriarchal paradigm. That's what you hear today. And then we moved into the New Testament era with the Son. He says, now the Son's era of the cross was really the era of sacrifice, the era of conflict, the era of atonement, the era of things breaking down because people couldn't get along, the era of conscience, the era of judgment. That was during the time of the first century moving into Catholicism, which played a kind of role in justifying what he's saying. Remember, these guys all saw the apostasy of the Catholic Church and of the churches in France. They hated it. They saw them as hypocrites. I get that. He says, but the era that was coming, this is how Hegel put it. He says the era that's going to come up out of this crazy capitalist, godless, pseudo-religious and pseudo-political system will be the area of the Holy Spirit, the era of the Holy Spirit. He calls the era of the Holy Spirit, please watch this, the community spirit that will ultimately lead us all into a one family entity. So now I want you to think about that as I close. I taught this many, many years ago here at Grace. So you will hear people in the world talking about the Holy Ghost, won't you? Whose mouths are filled with cursing and bitterness, who have absolutely no commitment to Jesus Christ whatsoever. You know it. But the Holy Ghost in their systems is simply emotionalism, simply fanaticism, simply communalism. The Holy Ghost for them is in the nightclub. The Holy Ghost for them is in the studio. The Holy Ghost for them is on the stage. They attribute to the Holy Ghost all their successes, even though the material that they use is so perverse and so ungodly and so anti-like God that for them to even associate the Holy Spirit with the vileness of the stuff that comes out of our communities now, which I'm shameful, because right now it's getting so absolutely bad, so bad that it's so bad that I'm absolutely sure that we are on the brink of a utterly mass deception that will have no rational argument to deliver people out of. It's bad. And they will get up behind the microphone on the day of their rewards and say God blessed them to do what they did. In addition to that kind of stretching credulity, you see a gathering of the unregenerate world incrementally coming together under the same banner. They're coming together. They're coming together. And the gospel has no place in it. So what happens every 8 years for all of us is that we're under a test. Whether our allegiance is to the one who has given us the victory, or whether our allegiance is to the one who tells us we are a victim. Every 8 years we go through a purge, because politics is a damning, diabolical system that demands divide. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. Far as me, as I told you before, if I ever would have once chosen identity politics, the only kind of church I would have had is a black church or a white church. Because identity politics does not allow us to do what the gospel allows us to do. And that is transcend the plantation system and meet people at the reality of who they are in Christ. And thus our doors have been opened up for 25 years for whites and blacks and Latinos and Asians, as you guys have seen. And I have labored hard to make sure that we understood that the people among us are 100% children of the living God, and that there is no hierarchical attitude that is to ever be implied, even with the dominant representation of black people among us, because that would not be the spirit of Christ. It would not be the gospel. And you will hear this every Sunday is the most divided day of the week. Have you heard that before? Sunday is the most divided day of the week. That's not true. Sunday is the most honest day of the week. It's the most honest day. It's the day where people who profess to be Christians declare honestly that they don't have a gospel that has the ability to bring white folks and black folks and Asian folks and folks of all different hues together under the unity of the person and work of Jesus Christ. That their gospel does not have power to raise them up out of identity politics. That is honest across the nation. White folks over there, black folks over there, because Jesus is not the power source that changes their identity, that allows us as blacks and whites and everything in between to authentically love one another, putting aside every other system for the reality of who we are in Christ. That's the battle I've been fighting for 25 years. That's the battle I've been fighting for 25 years. And we'll put one more thing and pray and let you go. Here's another one. The enemy does not care how many battles we win, so long as we ultimately lose. All we need to do is lose one time and quit and give up and capitulate. And he doesn't care that we won all the way up to the year 2020. If we don't keep fighting for the supremacy and exclusivity of Jesus Christ in its absolute control of our lives as our identity until we die, he doesn't care, because he's swooping the whole world into his arms. And he's yanking out as many Christians as he can to bring them into the delusion of the movement. He doesn't care. So I'm going to say to those of you who really are saying that you take Christ serious, understand that you have to be brave when it comes to the truth. Brave when it comes to the truth. You have to have the boldness of a lion when it comes to the truth. And if God should grace you to be brave, also ask him to grace you to be joyful. Be a joyful, brave Christian telling the world, I got a solution. And it's not red, and it's not blue, is purple. It's the royalty of King Jesus, whose bloody atonement, mixed with hell-bound sinners like you and I, raised us from the dead and sat us at his own right hand and clothed us in purple robes with Christ. With him I live, and with him I die. All right, we're going to pick this up next Friday. God bless you. Let's go home, you guys.